Listen, this is every parent's worst nightmare. You have your child goes out with friends and everybody comes back except your child. So I understand the position they're taking where they want answers. They want to know why this tragic situation happened, and they're willing to do anything to get those answers. And I think rightfully so. Any parent will feel the same way. But let's not jump to conclusions here. We also can't look at what the family is saying and kind of take that as law, because they're going to hear investigators talk the way they kind of want to ingest the information. So the investigators are saying, they're saying, listen, we're doing an investigation. We plan on moving forward. However, the evidence shows, the family can come out of that thinking, well, there has to be something there. So clearly they're going to have something to present to the grand jury, but that's not really the case.
And to be clear, it does not necessarily have to be or would be a homicide charge. There could be other crimes associated with this investigation, even if somebody misled law enforcement, which I'm not saying happened, but you could present anything to a grand jury, right?
Absolutely. And we don't have to be talking about murder or homicide. This could be an accidental death where there was evidence tampering, right? Where they tampered with the evidence, maybe deleted something from the cell phone that just seemed weird or odd, or put somebody else in a bad light. So they did that so they wouldn't look bad, even though it had nothing to do with the death itself.
I got to say, I'm a little confused by the cell phone. I've seen reports that the family hadn't initially handed over to law enforcement, and now it's going to be this joint examination both by the family's experts and law enforcement's experts and investigators. How does that work exactly? Have you ever heard of that before?
I have. I've actually done those forensic analysis of electronic devices where I've had my expert go in and capture these devices, actually get them from the investigators themselves. It's a little different than when you're talking about blood samples or something like that, when you're passing it around and you don't want to do that because it could be, contaminated. With electronic evidence, those things are going to be consistent. It's going to show when a text message was sent, what was included in that text message. There's going to be time blocks and things like that that are really difficult to change and almost impossible to change. So I've had situations where I've done investigations at the same time as the federal or state investigators to try and get that data off of phones, laptops, computers, other things like that. It's different than what you normally think of like passing around blood samples or bullet, fragments or something, or fingerprints can be transferred or something like that.
Two things. One, there's also been a lot of talk about why he didn't have his phone, right? There's some conversation, well, if he went into the water, it'd be not uncommon for him to leave his phone behind, but then if he had gone off to talk with some girl, wouldn't he have his phone? Separate conversation. If it was in if the phone was in the family's possession or in, Ben Crump's possession for this period of time, does the evidence have to be excluded? Is it not contaminated in some way?
It doesn't, and that's just what we were just talking about. So I mean, some things are concrete, like that electronic data information of it's or received, or if it was deleted. If, say, for example, the family got it and someone's saying, well, the evidence is bad because the family could have added that, there's going to be an electronic footprint of when that text was sent. So if it wasn't sent before the death, then obviously it wouldn't be included in any investigation involving the death. That's a little different when you talk about how high stakes those electronic data is, and how actually it shows you how beneficial it is to have that, because that's concrete.
Look, the family needs answers.
A mother picks up her son's phone expecting to find the usual silly selfies, voice notes, the kind of digital trail every teenager leaves behind without even thinking about it. Instead, she finds nothing. Not a single image. Not one message. Not a trace of a boy who, just hours earlier, had been laughing on a beach surrounded by friends. Someone had erased him before she ever got the chance to look. He had a tryout on Monday. Division 1. The kind of opportunity young men spend years chasing. He wasn't going anywhere. He had every reason in the world to come home. He never did. What you are about to hear is not a story about an accident. It is not a story about a reckless teenager making a bad decision on a holiday weekend. It is the story of a family who was handed an explanation, and looked that explanation dead in the eye and said, "That is not our son." There is a video. There is an argument caught on camera. There is a voice, and in that voice one desperate question cuts through everything else like a blade. Where is my phone? What are you doing? Days later, that same young man was pulled from the water. And that phone? It came back to his mother wiped clean. Before we go any further, and we need to say this clearly, the details of this case are deeply disturbing. There are unanswered questions surrounding the final hours of a young man's life that have shaken communities across this country and beyond. If you are sensitive to content involving the unexplained death of a young person, please take a moment before continuing. We do not take this lightly and we will not treat it lightly. This is not entertainment. This is someone's child. This is a mother and a father sitting in front of a camera for the first time since their son's body was recovered, not to grieve quietly, but because they say the truth has not been told. And they are done waiting for someone else to tell it. If you are new here, welcome to Unsolved Files, the channel where we don't let cases go cold without a fight. Hit subscribe and drop a like so you never miss a case. And tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching this from? Because this case has reached every corner of it. Now, let's get into what really happened. Horn Island is not somewhere you end up by accident. It sits roughly 10 miles off the Mississippi Gulf Coast, south of Ocean Springs, and the only way to reach it is by boat. It is a federally protected barrier island, part of the Gulf Islands National Seashore managed by the National Park Service. There is no staff out there. No drinking water. No shelter. No phone signal. No facilities of any kind. What it has is miles of untouched shoreline, shifting sand, and on a holiday weekend, hundreds of people who made the same trip from the mainland to spend the day on the water. For locals, especially young people from Ocean Springs and the surrounding area, it is a well-known summer destination. For Nolan and this particular group of friends, it was not new territory. They had made this same trip before without a single problem. The group that went out that July 4th had history. These were not strangers who met at a dock that morning. Nolan, Trace's Tin Shepard, and the others had been close since their freshman year at Ocean Springs High School. Shepard later described Nolan as one of his best friends, the kind of person you automatically felt comfortable around from the first conversation. They had grown up together, played together, and kept that friendship going even as their paths after high school began to diverge. That morning, multiple boats carrying different friend groups made the 45-minute ride out to the northwest tip of Horn Island, which is the popular gathering area known for its beaches. By late morning, it had turned into a full day out on the water. Shepard confirmed that the group had been drinking since late morning. He described the day as one last hurrah before everyone headed back to school or returned to work after the holiday break. For several hours, by all accounts, it was exactly that. Nothing unusual. Nothing that stood out. Just a group of young people on a beach on the 4th of July doing what thousands of others across that coastline were doing at the same moment. Then the afternoon shifted. According to the Jackson County Sheriff's Office, Nolan Wells was last seen alive on Horn Island at approximately 3 p.m. That is the last confirmed sighting. Data later obtained by CBS News established that the boat carrying his friends departed Horn Island at 4:31 p.m. that afternoon. Nolan Xavier Wells was not on it. What happened in that window and why Nolan was not on that boat when it left, is where the accounts split and where they have stayed split ever since. Trace's Tin Shepard told Good Morning America that Nolan had met a young woman on the island earlier that day. Shepard's description was straightforward. They met that day. Nolan clearly liked her. But it was the only time they had ever spent time together, right there on Horn Island on July 4th. Shepard said Nolan chose to stay behind because of her, planning to find another way back to the mainland later. Sheriff John Ledbetter gave a statement to ABC News that aligned with that account. From what investigators understood, Nolan chose to stay on the island. That was the official position. But attorney Ben Crump, retained by the Wells family, presented a different version of events from the same young woman. According to Crump, she told a different story entirely. She said Nolan had told her he was going back to the boat to rejoin his friends. Two people. One conversation. Two completely opposite conclusions about what Nolan Wells said he was going to do next. That question does not get answered here. Christine Wonsley was not watching the clock that evening. Nolan had stayed out late before. A movie that ran long time at a friend's place, nothing that had ever needed a phone call to explain. She had no specific time she was expecting him back. That kind of loose arrangement was normal for a teenager old enough to come and go on his own. So when evening came and went without word from him, she did not immediately reach for her phone. Then her phone rang. It was not Nolan calling. It was Warren, one of the young men who had been on the boat with him that day. The call came in at 11:07 p.m. Christine said the moment she saw who was calling, something in her dropped. His friends did not call her like that. That was not how it worked. The fact that it was Warren on the other end of that call, and not her son, told her something was wrong before a single word was spoken. Warren was one of the three friends who had made the trip to Horn Island with Nolan that day. He is also the stepson of Jackson County Chancery Judge Ashley Cole, a detail that would become more significant as the case developed in the weeks that followed. According to attorney Ben Crump, Warren also contacted the Coast Guard around that same time that night. Crump has since flagged discrepancies around exactly how and when that contact was made, and those discrepancies remain unresolved. Christine did not wait. She called her close friend Tashima, whose sons had grown up alongside Nolan since their days playing City League together, and asked her to reach out directly to the boys to find out what had happened and what they knew. At the same time, Christine and Elmore began trying to get law enforcement involved. What followed was not a coordinated emergency response. It was a runaround. They contacted the Jackson County Sheriff's Department. They were directed to Ocean Springs Police. They reached Mississippi's Department of Marine Resources, which took Christine's information and then sent her back to Ocean Springs Police. Eventually, Jackson County formally took over the case. But by the time that happened, hours had already passed since that 11:07 p.m. call. In any missing person investigation, those early hours are the most critical. Evidence is freshest. Witnesses are most accessible. The trail is still warm. That window was closing while Christine and Elmore were still trying to figure out which agency would actually respond. While all of that was happening, Christine was tracking her son through two apps at the same time. Snapchat was showing his phone in one location. Life 360, a separate tracking service, was showing something different. His phone appeared to be moving in the direction of the mainland. His car was stationary somewhere else entirely. Christine Wonsley filed an official missing persons report at midnight. A multi-agency search involving the U.S. Coast Guard, the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, and the National Park Service launched shortly after. Nolan was still out there somewhere. The search that launched after midnight on July 4th stretched across 2 full days on open water, 10 miles from the mainland, on a federally managed island with no infrastructure and no communications. The agencies involved were the U.S. Coast Guard, the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, the National Park Service, and the Jackson County Sheriff's Office. They were joined by the United Cajun Navy, a volunteer search and rescue organization with experience operating in the Gulf Coast region. The United Cajun Navy made a point of noting publicly that the specific area of Horn Island where the group had gathered that day was known to have strong rip current conditions. That detail was noted. It was not treated as a conclusion. The search ran through July 5th without a confirmed finding. On the morning of July 6, 2026, at approximately 8:45 a.m., a National Park Service ranger discovered a body in the water off the northwest shore of Horn Island. The body was face down. The description matched Nolan Wells. Jackson County Coroner Bruce Lynn Jr. confirmed the identity through dental records. He told CNN that there were no immediate, obvious signs of physical trauma on the body. However, he said the uncertain circumstances surrounding how Nolan came to be on that island alone were reason enough to request a full autopsy rather than move forward with any assumptions. That autopsy was conducted on July 7th at the Mississippi State Medical Examiner's Coast Lab. As of the filming of this video, those results have not been made public. Toxicology findings, which take additional time to process, are still outstanding as well. Sheriff John Ledbetter spoke to the press in the days following the discovery. His position was that investigators did not have information at that time leading them to believe a crime had occurred. His office classified this as a death investigation, not a homicide investigation. That distinction, death investigation versus homicide investigation, was not lost on Christine and Elmore Wonsley. It became the first point of public conflict between the family and law enforcement, and it opened a door that has not closed since. On the same day Nolan's body was confirmed, July 6, 2026, the Wells family retained civil rights and personal injury attorney Ben Crump. The announcement was immediate and the message was direct. Crump stated publicly that Nolan Wells was a beloved son, teammate, and friend who went out to celebrate the 4th of July and never came home. He said the family deserves answers and they deserve the truth, and that his team would not rest until every fact about what happened on Horn Island was brought into the light. What the family was being told at that point did not sit right with either parent. When law enforcement communicated to Christine and Elmore that the most likely explanation was accidental drowning, Christine said it made both of them immediately uncomfortable. She did not dispute law enforcement's right to investigate. She said publicly that she respects law enforcement. But her question was pointed: why are we so quick to rush to this? The investigation had barely begun. The body had just been found. And already a conclusion was being shaped around it. Christine's rejection of the stay-behind account was just as direct. Nolan had been raised with one rule that never changed. If you leave somewhere with the group, you come back with the group. She said that if she had personally been in that situation, she would have made sure Nolan was back on that boat before it left. If he had pushed back, she would have handed him a phone on the spot so his own parents could tell him the same thing. And she said plainly that she would never, under any circumstances, have left someone else's child alone on an island. When asked directly whether she believed Nolan was left behind rather than choosing to stay, her answer was a single word: yes. Elmore Wonsley approached the same question from a different angle. He described years of specific conversations with his son on exactly this topic. Stay with your group. Never split off chasing after a girl. He told Nolan directly more than once that there are girls everywhere and she is not the only one. He acknowledged Nolan had probably grown tired of hearing it. But that is precisely why the account given to investigators does not hold up for Elmore. 3 friends left that island. 1 stayed behind. In his view, those 3 friends had a responsibility to make sure that one person was not left on a remote island without his phone. That responsibility was not met. There was also a specific detail in the initial account Christine received that she raised publicly. The explanation she was given named a girl called Katie as the reason Nolan chose to stay behind. But in that same initial conversation she was also told that Katie herself was unaccounted for, and that nobody in the group actually knew who she was. The entire justification for why Nolan stayed behind depended on one specific person, and that person was simultaneously described as missing and unknown to everyone else there. Crump highlighted a separate contradiction at the July 10th press conference. The young woman Nolan had spent time with that day said Nolan told her he was heading back to the boat to rejoin his friends. The friends said Nolan told them he was staying behind with her. Both accounts cannot be true. Crump's question to the public was simple: which is it? On July 10, 2026, Christine and Elmore Wonsley stood before cameras at the National Action Network headquarters in Harlem, New York, alongside Ben Crump and Reverend Al Sharpton. The family issued a formal call for a full, transparent, and urgent investigation into their son's death. Crump announced that Colin Kaepernick's Know Your Rights Foundation had agreed to fund an independent autopsy, specifically to ensure the examination was conducted by a doctor with no ties to Mississippi law enforcement. Tyler Perry announced he would cover the costs of the funeral. Filmmaker Spike Lee publicly expressed his support as well, according to Sharpton. Crump also addressed the historical context directly. In explaining why the family chose to pursue an independent autopsy outside of Mississippi, he referenced the killing of Emmett Till. He was not drawing an equivalence of facts between the 2 cases. He was explaining the family's reasonable and documented concern about how a case involving a young black man and a group of white friends might be handled in a state with that specific history. Christine addressed the racial commentary circulating online about Nolan's friend group without hesitation. She said she and Elmore would never tell any of their children they could not be friends with someone because of the color of their skin. She said Nolan's heart was big enough to include everybody. And if anyone had a problem with how they chose to raise their son, that was their problem, not hers. If this case has your attention right now, hit subscribe before we go any further. What comes next is where this investigation gets forensic. The phone, the deleted data, the FBI, and what digital evidence can still recover even after someone believes it is gone. You do not want to miss that breakdown when the results drop. Subscribe to Unsolved Files right now and make sure you are here when this case moves. While the family was pushing publicly for answers, something else was circulating online that pulled the case in a different direction entirely. A video had spread widely across social media appearing to show a heated argument taking place on or near Horn Island on July 4th. The clip was shot from a boat on the water. Voices were raised. The exact nature of what was happening was not immediately clear from the footage alone. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office acknowledged the video directly. They issued a public request for anyone who had been on Horn Island that day to submit original, unedited photos and videos, specifically those depicting alleged altercations or containing images believed to include Nolan Wells. The Sheriff's Office stated that original media often contains critical details essential to an ongoing investigation and that even information that seems insignificant could prove valuable. Ben Crump addressed the video in an early interview and stated that the audio appeared to capture Nolan demanding his phone back from someone. He described it as audio that had been confirmed as Nolan's voice protesting the fact that his friends had his phone. However, in a separate interview around the same time, Crump pulled back slightly on that identification, acknowledging there were young people arguing in the video without fully committing to the voice being confirmed as Nolan's. The 2 versions of his certainty do not align with each other, and that inconsistency became part of the public record surrounding the video. Then Traciston Shepard spoke. In a phone interview with Good Morning America, Shepard said the voice heard yelling in that video is his own, not Nolan's. He explained that there had been an argument that afternoon, but it had nothing to do with Nolan's phone. Shepard said a stranger had started a fight with him, and the yelling captured in the video was him trying to get free from people who were restraining him so he could continue the altercation. He said there was no talk about a phone anywhere in that video. Shepard's girlfriend corroborated his version of events. His uncle, who was also present, said a group of older adults stepped in and broke up the fight between the younger people on shore. Javon Williams, a separate friend of Nolan's who was also on Horn Island that day, told TMZ independently that Nolan was not in the video at all. Shepard went further in his account to Rolling Stone. He noted that a person wearing blue swim trunks who is visible in the clip had been assumed by many online to be Nolan, since Nolan was last seen in blue swim trunks. Shepard said that person was not Nolan. He pointed out that Nolan stood 6 feet 2 inches tall and the individual in the video was clearly too short to be him. Shepard said Nolan was out of frame entirely in the water when that video was recorded. Through Crump, the Wells family responded carefully. They said they could not discount Shepard's account and that they welcomed every version of events because the only thing they were after was the truth. There was one more piece of circulating content that needed addressing. A photograph appeared on Instagram on July 5th appearing to show Nolan at a pool party, which led a significant portion of the public to assume it had been taken on the night he went missing or in the early hours of July 5th. Two separate sources, including Shepard himself, confirmed to Rolling Stone that the photo was taken on June 27th, the Sunday before the 4th of July weekend. It had nothing to do with the night Nolan disappeared. What the video actually shows, and whether it has any bearing on what happened to Nolan Wells, remains an open question under active investigation. Of everything that has emerged in this case so far, one piece of evidence keeps pulling investigators, legal analysts, and the public back to the same place. Not the video. Not the conflicting accounts. The phone. Christine Wonsley described her son's relationship with his phone as something close to a running joke between them. Nolan was constantly on Snapchat. He sent her selfies throughout the day. A peace sign. A quick smile. A check-in that did not need words. It was just what he did. She knew his patterns on that app the way a mother knows her child's habits, because he had shown them to her consistently for long enough that the absence of them would be immediately obvious. When she finally got access to Nolan's phone, she and her sister went through it together. What they found was nothing. No saved images. No videos. No Snapchat content from July 4th. Her sister checked a secondary account linked to his profile. That was empty too. Christine said the silence on that phone was not something she recognized as her son. The timing of when they checked matters significantly. They went through the phone before the 24-hour mark had passed since the content would have been posted. Snapchat operates on a system where content disappears automatically after 24 hours unless a user actively saves it. Anything Nolan posted or received on July 4th should still have been accessible within that window. It was not there. Not a single image. Not one saved clip from an entire holiday weekend on the water with a group of friends. Ben Crump stated directly that the family believes both Snapchat content and standard text messages were deleted from Nolan's phone before it was ever returned to Christine. That is not a minor claim. The phone had been in the possession of the friends from the time the boat left Horn Island at 4:31 p.m. on July 4th through an unspecified point the following day before it reached Christine's hands. That gap, that window between when the friends had the phone and when the family received it, is what legal analysts have zeroed in on. One analyst covering this case stated plainly that if content was deleted from that phone during the time it was in someone else's possession, that alone could form the basis of an evidence tampering argument, regardless of what the deleted content ultimately showed. The act of deletion during that window is the issue, not just what was deleted. The phone's physical location on the night of July 4th added another layer. Reporting by the Griot indicated that tracking data appeared to show the device moving in the direction of the mainland after Nolan had disappeared from the island. His phone and his car were showing up in different locations simultaneously, tracked through two separate apps. That discrepancy has not been publicly explained by investigators. On July 15th, Sheriff John Ledbetter confirmed that the FBI had been brought in to assist with the forensic examination of all digital evidence collected in the case. Retired FBI agent Kieran Ramsey, speaking with News Nation, laid out what that forensic process can actually recover. Investigators can send preservation letters directly to Snapchat requesting data stored on the company's own servers, entirely separate from anything remaining on the physical device. They can pull geolocation data that tracks the precise movements of the phone and anyone who had it in their possession at any given time. Every application opened on that phone, every GPS coordinate logged, every cell tower the device connected to creates a data point. Ramsey said investigators may be able to recover several layers of information from the account even if the content was deleted at the device level. A separate legal analyst made the point even more directly. He said he had personally helped construct a murder case built entirely on deleted text messages recovered from a phone. Deleting a message removes it from view. It does not remove it from the deeper storage architecture of the device, and forensic tools are specifically designed to reach those levels. District Attorney Angel Myers-McElrath confirmed publicly that this case is being treated as a priority and that upon conclusion of the investigation, all findings will be presented to a grand jury. That is standard procedure in Jackson County. But the fact that a grand jury has been explicitly confirmed means this investigation is not winding down. It is building toward a formal legal evaluation of everything recovered. The FBI's involvement extended beyond the digital forensics. The agency confirmed separately to ABC News that it is also working to address interstate threats that have been directed at individuals connected to this case. Tracis Tin Shepard confirmed publicly that he and others connected to the case have received threats. Jackson County Chancery Judge Ashley Cole posted publicly on Facebook about death threats her family had received in connection with the investigation, addressing them directly in a statement that drew its own attention from legal observers. This case has not quieted down. It has expanded. And the forensic evidence sitting inside that phone may be what determines where it goes next. If you are not subscribed to Unsolved Files yet, right now is the moment. When the autopsy results come back, when the FBI forensics are complete, when the grand jury process begins to move, this channel will be the first place breaking it down in this kind of detail. Hit subscribe. Turn on notifications. Because the next update in this case is coming, and you will want to already be here when it does. Setting aside the competing narratives and the disputed video, there are specific items in the factual record of this case that do not require interpretation to be significant. They simply do not align with the official account as it has been publicly stated. Each one stands on its own. Start with the shorts. When Christine Wonsley posted publicly asking for information after her son's body was found, a young woman who had been on Horn Island on July 4th reached out to her directly. That woman told Christine that the official report she had seen described Nolan wearing black shorts on the day he disappeared. She had photographs taken on Horn Island that same afternoon. In those photographs, Nolan was wearing blue shorts. That detail is not a matter of fading memory or a stressful night distorting recollection. It is a photograph taken on the day in question contradicting a description in an official document. Notably, the Jackson County Sheriff's own missing persons press release had also described Nolan as wearing blue swim trunks and sunglasses. Black and blue are not colors that blur together under any reasonable reading of a document or a photo. The discrepancy is there in the record. Next is the conflicting final conversation, which has been introduced in this documentary but deserves its place here as a documented factual problem rather than simply a narrative contradiction. The young woman Nolan spent time with that afternoon said he told her he was heading back to the boat. The friend said he told them he was staying behind with her. The official explanation for why Nolan did not leave Horn Island with his group rests entirely on one of those two accounts being correct. They cannot both be true. No clarification has been provided publicly. Then there is the timeline of the response on the night Nolan went missing. The call came in at 11:07 p.m. The family spent the hours that followed being directed from one agency to the next before Jackson County formally assumed the case. In a missing person investigation, those earliest hours carry the most evidentiary weight. Witnesses are still accessible. Phones still hold unaltered data. Physical evidence has not yet shifted. Those hours were spent navigating jurisdictional confusion rather than conducting an active search. The phone's location data also remains publicly unaddressed. Two separate tracking applications showed the device and the car in different locations simultaneously on the night of July 4th, with the phone appearing to move toward the mainland. No official explanation for that discrepancy has been provided. Legal analysts raised a cluster of evidence preservation questions that have similarly gone unanswered. Were the three friends on the boat asked whether they had changed clothes before speaking with investigators? Were they examined for any signs of a physical altercation? Were those basic procedural questions even part of the initial interviews? None of those answers have entered the public record. Analysts also took issue with the timing of the sheriff's early public statements suggesting no evidence of foul play. Their position was consistent. An investigation at that stage should be described as ongoing, not steered toward a conclusion before foundational questions have been addressed. Finally, Jackson County Chancery Judge Ashley Cole, the stepmother of Warren, posted a detailed public statement on Facebook in the days following Nolan's death. The statement addressed threats her family had received and laid out her family's account of the timeline. Legal analysts noted the timing. The statement arrived early, before harder questions about the case had been fully posed, and before any formal investigative findings had been released. Analysts described it as building a public record in advance of scrutiny that had not yet fully arrived. None of these items by themselves prove anything. Together, they form a pattern of unanswered questions that the grand jury will eventually have to weigh. Here is where the investigation stands as of the filming of this video. Not speculation. Not theory. What is confirmed, who is involved, and what is still outstanding. Sheriff John Ledbetter confirmed that his office has interviewed approximately 60 witnesses in connection with Nolan's death. That number includes the 3 friends who were on the boat with Nolan on July 4th. All 3 have been interviewed in depth. Traces Tin Shepard confirmed publicly that he has spoken with investigators and stated that the group has been cooperating with authorities throughout the process. The FBI entered the picture formally on July 15th. When Sheriff Ledbetter confirmed the agency is assisting with the forensic examination of all digital evidence collected so far. Ledbetter framed this as standard procedure given that Horn Island is federal land and his office regularly collaborates with federal agents on cases in that jurisdiction. Separately, the FBI confirmed to ABC News that it is also working to address interstate threats directed at individuals connected to this case. The agency did not identify the recipients publicly, but multiple people have stated openly that they have received threats. District Attorney Angel Myers-McElrath stated publicly that this case is being treated as a priority. She confirmed that upon conclusion of the investigation, all findings will be presented to a grand jury, which she described as standard operating procedure in Jackson County. No criminal charges have been filed against anyone. No arrests have been made. The grand jury has not yet convened. Ben Crump's team is running a parallel independent investigation alongside the official one. Crump said his office has been receiving between 50 and 100 calls per day from people who were on Horn Island on July 4th or who have information about individuals who were there. Despite that volume of incoming information, Crump confirmed he has not yet spoken directly with the 3 friends who were on the boat with Nolan. Those individuals have retained their own legal representation, which has prevented direct communication between their counsel and the Wells family's legal team. 2 separate autopsy processes are running concurrently. The Mississippi State Medical Examiner's Office is handling the official autopsy. The independent autopsy, funded by Colin Kaepernick's Know Your Rights Foundation and conducted in Washington, D.C., was arranged specifically to ensure an examination with no ties to Mississippi law enforcement. Results from both autopsies remain pending. Toxicology findings, which require additional processing time, are also still outstanding. Dispatch audio from a private towing company has been released and entered the investigative record. The audio involves a call connected to the boat the friends used that day, with a person heard requesting assistance. The full significance of that audio has not yet been publicly established. Crump has also raised publicly whether this case should be elevated to the Mississippi State Bureau of Investigation rather than remaining under the jurisdiction of the local sheriff's office, given the scale and complexity of what the investigation has grown into. The reward stands at $100,000. $50,000 announced by Reverend Al Sharpton. $50,000 matched immediately by Tyler Perry. That offer is active right now for anyone with information that leads to answers in this case. On July 20, 2026, 16 days after Nolan Wells was last seen alive on Horn Island, his family laid him to rest at Center Point Church in Ocean Springs, Mississippi. His football teammates were there. The crowd that filled that church was multiracial, multigenerational, and large. Christine Wonsley, Elmore Wonsley, Ben Crump, and Reverend Al Sharpton stood at the front. Sharpton delivered the eulogy. He acknowledged directly what he saw in front of him. He said not all white people are racist and not all black people are angry, and that somewhere in the middle is where justice has to be found. He said the family's closure can only come if there is justice. At the close of the service, Ben Crump led the crowd in a single chant. Nolan's life mattered. Before the service ended, Sharpton announced a $50,000 reward for any new information about the circumstances surrounding Nolan's death. Tyler Perry, who had been following the service, matched that amount on the spot. The combined $100,000 reward was formally announced from inside that church, with Sharpton's words cutting through clearly. He was not on that island by himself. Somebody saw something and knows something. At a press conference held immediately after the funeral, Crump confirmed that his team is still waiting to receive the official incident report from the Jackson County Sheriff's Office. Under Mississippi law, A victim's family is legally entitled to receive an incident report within 72 hours of requesting it. As of the filming of this video, that report has not been delivered to the Wells family. The family met with District Attorney Angel Myers-McElrath directly after the funeral specifically to address when that report would be provided. Christine Wonsley spoke after the service and thanked the community, Tyler Perry, and everyone who had rallied around her family during the weeks since Nolan's death. During his remarks, Crump named other cases where families had been forced to fight publicly for transparency from institutions that moved too slowly or not at all. He named Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, Breonna Taylor, Botham Jean, Stephon Clark, and Sonia Massey. He was not drawing direct comparisons between those cases and Nolan's. He was placing the Wells family inside a documented pattern of black families who did not get answers until they demanded them loudly and publicly. The funeral is over. The investigation is not. As of right now, this is where things stand. No official cause of death has been confirmed for Nolan Xavier Wells. The autopsy conducted by the Mississippi State Medical Examiner's Office has not produced public results. The independent autopsy funded by Colin Kaepernick's Know Your Rights Foundation has also not released findings. Toxicology results, which take additional processing time beyond a standard autopsy, are still outstanding on both tracks. The FBI is actively examining all digital evidence collected in this case. More than 60 witnesses have been interviewed. The 3 friends who were on the boat with Nolan on July 4th have cooperated with investigators and have been interviewed in depth. No charges have been filed against anyone. No arrests have been made. District Attorney Angel Myers-McElrath has confirmed the case is a priority and that findings will go before a grand jury upon conclusion of the investigation. The official incident report has still not been delivered to the Wells family despite Mississippi law entitling them to receive it within 72 hours of their request. The 2 conflicting accounts of Nolan's final conversation on that beach remain unresolved. The phone content discrepancies remain unresolved. The $100,000 reward is active. This investigation is fully open. The night before he left for Horn Island, Nolan Wells made his family salmon for dinner. He was 18 years old. He had a Division I tryout on Monday. He hugged his mother, kissed her, and walked out the door into a holiday weekend he had every reason to come back from. That is the last ordinary moment this family had with their son. And everything that has followed has been a fight to understand why that moment was also the last one. Christine and Elmore Wonsley have not asked for a specific verdict. They have not publicly accused any individual of any specific act. What they have asked for, consistently, across every interview, every press conference, and every public statement since July 6th, is a real investigation and straight answers. That ask has not yet been fully met. If you were on Horn Island on July 4, 2026, and you have photos, video, or any information about what happened that day, the Jackson County Sheriff's Office and Ben Crump's legal team both want to hear from you. There is a $100,000 reward for information that leads to answers in this case. Unsolved Files covers cases exactly like this one from the first report through the final ruling. When the autopsy results drop, when the FBI forensics are complete, when the grand jury process begins to move, this channel will be here breaking it down with the same level of detail you just watched. That is why you subscribe now and not later. Hit subscribe. Turn on notifications. Drop your location in the comments below and let us know where in the world you are watching from. And if this case matters to you, share it with someone who needs to know it exists. Because the more people watching, the harder this becomes to ignore. Nolan's family is still waiting for answers. We will be here when they arrive.